Welcome to our presentation, Don't Fall into an Energy Rut. My name is ARussian, and my colleague Paige Mayer and I are happy to have you guys here. Let's begin. A little brief overview about myself. As stated, my name is ARussian. I have been with TASB for over 3.5 years, and I am the energy consultant, and I run the TASB Energy Co-op. We help school districts, cities, and counties procure electricity, and we are happy once again to have you all here.
And I am Paige Mayer, and I'm a senior sales executive with Direct Energy Business. I'm sure y'all have seen me around, the brown curly-haired girl that gets super excited about these conferences and the fun giveaways that we can normally do. So this is a different, but we are excited to still talk to you today and appreciate your attention during this virtual learning. All right, we thought we would kick it off with a little trivia. We don't want to bore you automatically. So since we're in September, children born in the fall are statistically better students and live longer. True or false? Let's see, what are you thinking? It is true. So I thought this was so interesting. The UK Department of Education and the University of Chicago actually came out with a study saying that it is better to be born in the fall. You're more than likely going to live until you're the age of 100, and you are smarter. So I hate to say it that I have 2 boys. One was born in June and the other was born in August. So not sure what that says about me.
I'm with you there, Paige. Us January babies. So sad. What a shame.
Yes.
All right. So let's go over the basics of what this presentation is going to be about. We want to make this, or at least try to make this, as conversational as possible. So feel free to send us some questions or comments on the side or wherever the space is for you to leave comments. What we want to do is give you a general idea about procurement and strategies. You know, there's not necessarily a right or wrong way, but there are different ways, right? So like I said, let's make this kind of easy. And if you can tell, we have this equation: the energy price, usage equals your supply charges. If you look at the energy price, we're going to talk about procurement strategies. Once again, we have those multiple ways: RFP, wholesale market, interlocal. We'll dive a little deeper into those. And then we'll look on the opposite equation, and we'll look at what affects the bottom line costs, such as your usage, how you manage your load, your DR, and your 4CP, right? All of this, we're trying to lower our energy spending, right? Drive down our total usage and get your supply charge as low as possible, right? As we said before, everyone watching this, they have an electricity bill, right? So how can we drive down those costs? Once again, this is a very basic and easy equation. With A and B, there are ways to also improve those individually, right? So, Paige, anything else to add?
No, I think that the takeaway for this whole presentation is there's no right or wrong strategy. We're just going to give you some different ideas for you to take back and say, okay, what have we been doing and what could we possibly do different moving forward? So again, there's no right or wrong answer. These are just multiple ways that you can go about accomplishing a lower energy charge at the end of the day.
Great. Okay, so first, let's talk about the first part of the equation, energy price. Okay, so we're focused on the procurement strategies. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we have the Education Code, Chapter 44. Right, certain procurement laws are required when purchasing electricity, or really any product or service for that matter. I know it's a little small, but this is directly pulled from that Education Code, right? This shows how to procure items of a certain expense. And as we all know, schools and maybe cities and counties are all held to a different standard, and they must follow these rules and guidelines, right? All right. So when you dig into the code, right, we have options. You have options. We have competitive bidding, competitive sealed proposals, your traditional RFP, an interlocal agreement or contract, and a reverse auction, right? And you can see at the top, I think I skipped it, but if you see the purchase of a product or service valued at $50,000 or more, must follow a certain method or must follow one of these options of procuring electricity. Okay. Once again, this is pulled directly from the education code to show you basically what those different options are, right? So let's talk about the first one, your RFP, your request for proposal. This should be very common for everyone, more of an overview, but I'm going to go ahead and let you know what it's all about. This is more of a formal route, right? The RFP invites multiple people to bid, and it also has typically a set timeline. They'll send the RFP out, and they said they would need it done by a certain date, right? There are no limitations for who can respond or how many responses for that matter. And anyone from a consultant to a broker, a company can always respond to this RFP. Okay. RFPs are great, but sometimes, not all the time, the lowest price doesn't mean the best value, right? You want to make sure the contract terms are all the same. You want to make sure you have the same product and you have that apples to apples comparison. For example, some suppliers may leave out noodle congestion, some may leave it in. Once again, that's that apples to apples comparison. Your add to lead and even your swing could be different. Okay. When we talk about payment terms, we're looking more, it could be net 15, net 30. Once again, make sure they're equivalent and make that apples to apples comparison. All right. Customer service is also a big deal. Not all suppliers have the same customer service. They're all different. So make sure you do your research and understand how their customer service is, right? And we look at market volatility, you know, we would recommend an RFP for typically for a school bus or maybe school supplies, something that's very much the same type of product and or service, okay? The pricing is extremely volatile and it changes every 15 minutes. So you want to make sure you have the same time with the same conditions to get the same price. Once again, we're talking about those apples to apples comparison, right? A few limitations of the RFP timeline. You have your published dates, you have your start date and your finish date. And what a lot of people don't really realize is that the RFP puts constraints on your time and purchase power, right? So for an example, what I mean by that is recently, there was a hurricane that hit the Gulf Coast, and, would a hurricane, a disaster, have an effect on the electricity or energy market? Yes, it would. And so let's say you're running an RFP and a hurricane hits the day of, would you really want to hit that strike price, or could you be able to hit the same price that you would want should there have not been a hurricane? Basically what I'm saying is, if a natural disaster occurs, you wouldn't want to strike on that date because electricity prices probably be at a very high, right? Finally, negotiate contracts prior to award. This is more of a multi-step process, and what we mean by that is you don't want to choose a winner based on the initial RFP response, right? You would want to create maybe a short list of 2 or 3 suppliers, or depending on how many submissions you received, right? Once you get those together, you'll want to do a final pricing round. I know it's a lot of work, but as long as you do your due diligence and compare apples to apples, an RFP is a good way to go. Paige, anything like that?
I always have to add something. So I've been in this position for about 12 years now, a little over 12 years. So I have responded to a lot of RFPs. And I would say that there are two things that are really kind of the pitfalls of RFPs. So this is going to be my recommendation to not do this. To Alex's point, kind of limiting you on a specific date. I've seen some RFPs that will literally put the day they are planning to transact. You know, it's part of the timeline. So, oh, here's when the bid opens, here's when it's due, here's when we're planning to transact. So to his point, you are completely pigeonholing yourself to transact on the day because it's according to the RFP, but it may not be in your best interest. So my recommendation would be to leave that a little bit more vague and just say that we are going to transact, you know, after this date, and that gives you some flexibility. And then to Alex's point, you don't want to just select your winner based on the initial response. The other mistake that I see is electricity prices are fluctuating all day, every day. And in an RFP, it requests pricing. And more often than not, it doesn't specify when prices should be based on. So if your RFP is due on Friday, I could decide that I want to price on Monday, whereas another supplier may decide to price on Thursday. So you're not comparing apples to apples there because the prices are under different market conditions. The other thing, which some people may disagree with, is that there can sometimes be some gamesmanship with these RFPs. We know that you are not going to execute on the price that is put in the initial RFP response. You haven't gone to board approval, you haven't reviewed contracts, yet you've put a lot of weight in the evaluation criteria on a price. So some suppliers will go in with an initially low price, knowing that A, it's going to score them higher points and potentially get them the business, but B, they know that they don't have to execute on that price. So just be aware of that. And I think if you take 2 or 3 suppliers to the winning round and continue to get executable pricing, that will eliminate the gamesmanship, and you can actually, you know, get a valid executable price, which ultimately serves you your best interest.
Nice, Paige.
Thanks.
All right. So another way to procure electricity is your interlocal, right? Essentially, the interlocal has already run. Essentially, they run an RFP for you in your district or your entity, right? You're not have to worry about spending all the manpower reviewing the RFPs or contract. There's no set date. The legal administrative fees are already taken care of. Once again, the pre-negotiated agreements and language of terms are already in your favor for the contract. And one of the best things is the interlocal has already vetted that supplier for you. Once again, they basically have done an RFP for themselves. The good thing about the interlocal is that it's specific to your entity, specific to the district, or specific to the city and county, right? And there's no timeline you have to follow, unlike the RFP, where you do have a start and a finish, right? Here, you let the experts handle when you lock in that rate. Right? One thing you want to do is to make sure that your supplier can stay open. And the good thing about interlocal is they handle that for you. They have selected a supplier that knows they will be around for a long period of time. They will have your back and will have your best interest and be able to provide you electricity. Paige?
So one thing I want to note is interlocals have become super popular, and it is a way to fulfill those RFP requirements and kind of check that box. What I think is important to note is that you can be a member of several different interlocals. You don't necessarily have to purchase. There's no language in an interlocal agreement that says, okay, once you join, you have to purchase electricity through us. So there's no harm in really getting an interlocal approved and becoming a member. It just gives you an option, which I think is important. The other thing that I find interesting about an interlocal is that it's an added layer of protection for you. Typically, depending on how involved that party is, they are your advocate. So if something goes wrong, a lot of the suppliers that have been vetted are held to a higher standard. So they can get kicked out of the interlocal or out of the being the selected vendor. So it's just, there's a little bit of protection there for you.
Thanks, Paige. All right, let's talk about wholesale market participation. This will be our last procurement option we'll dig into for the day, right? So here with the wholesale market participation, you're partnering essentially with a retailer, and this already fulfills the RFP through the wholesale level, right? So take a moment and look to your right and look at this giant blue circle. And what can you see there that takes what's the most space that the blue is taking up? It's the energy, the power, right? This is the contract price. If you look at it, 80% of that circle is blue, which is the energy price. And essentially, if you can get that energy price low, it will essentially lower your overall price.
Yeah, the wholesale energy piece.
Yes. Right. So going back, instead of a broker putting retailers against each other, we're looking more at the wholesale, right? And to give you a better understanding of what retail versus wholesale is, you think of a car dealership. When you drive down the road, you see Alex Russian's Toyota, right? Not just Toyota, or not just Tesla for that matter. You're basically skipping a whole set of extra costs and fees on top of that retail price and going directly to the wholesale price. Does that make sense, everyone? I'm asking for questions, but I know you can't talk to me, so I apologize. One more time. This gives you full transparency, right? It happens during real-time market. It eliminates the premium to hold, and you're able to review, typically, the actual event happening and able to see the prices go back and forth. Right. So here, once again, it ensures your apples to apples comparison. The product, the terms, everything else is already taken care of, and you're essentially just bidding on the energy.
Yeah. So I think this is a difficult concept for some. It's a little out of the norm. It's not what people are used to doing. We've been so focused on putting the retailers against one another. We feel like that's where the competition is. But when you look at this pie, it shows that wholesale energy piece of the pie, that retail margin, which is going to be the difference between the suppliers, is like 2% of your overall price. So do you want to work with someone that is promoting the competition among the 2% savings? Or do you want to partner with someone that's promoting the savings for that 80% of the pie? Because that's a drastic difference. So a lot of the people that offer these wholesale market participation option, it's literally an online tool. So you can have multiple users, several logins. So if a superintendent wants to log in, or your CFO, I mean, it's an excitement, and you're watching the bids come in live. So instead of a retailer calling their desk or calling the, wholesaler on the side saying, what's the best price that you can give me, and them not knowing whether you're really going to execute or not, these wholesale events are a guaranteed transaction at the end of the specified time. So you'll often find that wholesalers are a little bit more motivated to sharpen their pencil. They can also see the prices that are coming in. So if they really want the business, they know that they have to get 10 cents lower in order to get the business. So it's just another way to go about it. It is different, but it's live, it's transparent, so you're seeing the bids come in versus, you know, potentially on a spreadsheet that's been provided for you with a bunch of retailers listed.
All right. Wholesale market participation. Check it out. All right.
Well, this is a fun one. I like it.
Time for trivia. Since it's almost the fall and we're nearly there, what causes weight gain in the fall? Give it a few seconds. Answer on the side. Getting close.
I mean, one of my favorites is pumpkin pie, so tempted.
All right, Paige, what do we got?
All right, lack of vitamin D. I mean, some could argue that it's all of the above, which is totally fair, but the actual answer is C. I found this so interesting. The lack of vitamin D actually reduces your fat breakdown and it triggers fat storage. So the moral of the story is to get outside. You don't even have to go exercise. Just go sit outside and soak in the vitamin D and you won't store as much fat.
I would still watch out for that pumpkin pie though, Paige.
I don't know, maybe not. All right, so back to the basics. You've seen this slide before. Alex discussed the energy price, different strategies about trying to drive that piece down, but there's also the usage component of that equation. So there's several ways to manage your load. We're not going to discuss basics like turn off your lights or stagger things by 15 minutes. We specifically want to discuss demand response and 4CP. Okay, so what is demand response? Demand response is an energy curtailment program that's administered by ERCOT. The local utilities also have their own sometimes, but it's basically to maintain the stability of the grid. So when the grid is stressed, so think of, you know, August of last year when temperatures are over 100 degrees and everyone needs air conditioning, the grid is pushed. And so this is a program where people opt in to reduce their consumption to help the grid so that we don't have to go to a rolling blackout or brownout situation. For demand response, you need a curtailment service provider. So that entity acts as the administrator between ERCOT and you. If you work with a local utility, you can sign up without a curtailment service provider, but if you want to work with ERCOT, I would highly, highly recommend working with a CSP. That could include your retail electric provider, that could include a broker, a consultant, and there are some companies that just do demand response. But any of those are going to act on your behalf as far as all of the clean and telling ERCOT what you're willing to curtail. Doing that on your own is a lot of paperwork and a lot of work in general. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I would highly recommend working with a provider. So again, the goal of the demand response, this is not rocket science. It's just basically to keep the grid operating. So we don't want to be in a situation where we don't have power. So common examples of demand response, it doesn't have to be hard. So something as simple as raising the temperature set points of the thermostat. You know, I'm not saying that you have to raise it to 85 degrees, but even a couple of degrees can make a difference. If you have an area of your building or your school that you're not utilizing, perhaps you should shut off the lights, or you could raise the temperature in the gym if there aren't any activities. And then others, you know, you can activate self or standby generation. Not everyone has that availability, but there are small ways that can add up. So I find that one of the most common objections is, oh, well, I'm not a manufacturing facility that, you know, can just cut out a complete shift and shut down, which is you're right. You are not a manufacturing facility, but there are small ways. I mean, even shutting down an elevator and not having that operate would help, and just say utilize the stairs. So just try to think outside the box, because this is something that you could potentially participate in. So there are two different programs. There's an emergency response service 10 as well as 30. The only difference being that the ERS 10 allows you 10 minutes to shut down, and the ERS 30 gives you 30 minutes. And there are 3 different program periods, so you would need to opt in to each one. So, or you can do all of them, but you could just test for one if you wanted to. The eligibility, you have to be a minimum size of 100 kW. That doesn't necessarily just have to be on one meter. You know, if you have an entire campus, or you have several high schools, or you have several municipal buildings that you want to do, you can add that together and still qualify. And the only requirement is that you have to have an IDR meter, which is that interval data recorder with the 15 minutes where it records your usage. So the biggest thing is you need to identify, do I have the ability to curtail within 10 minutes or 30 minutes? You are notified. You can be notified via text, email, phone call. You can have multiple points of contact or just one, but that's going to be your biggest decision there of how quickly can I respond. So ERCOT does initiate one test per year. So if you were new and you wanted to enroll in the program, you would be called within the first 2 weeks of the contract start date to prove that you do actually have the capabilities of shedding that load. Now, if you pass that test, you are not retested for at least 330 days. And if an event is not called during that time, well, you performed and you're good to go. If you fail, that test is redone within 2 weeks. So some of the advantages, the enrollment times are flexible. You obviously don't have to enroll for all of those dates, and you also have some flexibility on the times as well. But the best thing is, as long as you pass that test, you are paid whether an event is called or not. So this is free money, which doesn't come often. Let's go to the next one. So demand response, it's a check, not a bill. Wow. I would love to get more checks in the mail versus bills. I don't know about you.
Me too.
The other thing, if you work with a retail electric provider, you actually have the option to bundle that demand response revenue onto your electricity bill. So it would eliminate, or it would reduce your overall energy price, and then you have the tax benefits on top of that. So I know most of these entities are tax exempt, but you're still going to have the gross receipts tax and the public utility commission assessment, so you would get a break on both of those. Another benefit, there's no out-of-pocket penalty for non-performance. So in my mind, there's really no reason to not try it out. If you fail the test, it just hurts your pride, right? So you failed, but you tried something new. And if you pass, well, guess what? You just made money for your district or your city. A couple other things to note is that you can get technical assistance from that CSP. So whether it's a provider or an actual company, they can help you put together the strategies and plans. If you want to take a look at your usage, maybe you say, gosh, I don't know that I can do this, but here are my IDR meters. Can you take a look? And we may be able to look and say, you know what, on this time period, it looks like you could shed about this much. What are your thoughts on that? So kind of do like a deep dive analysis of your historical data so that we can figure out what it is that you can curtail and what your potential savings are. The other thing to think about is if you're still hesitant, like, gosh, CSP or retail electric provider, I don't know, you may not know what you're talking about, we could always schedule a mock test without you even enrolling in the program. So you could just say, hey, within the next 2 weeks, give me a call. I want to see if I can respond in 10 minutes or 30 minutes, and I want to see what I'm actually able to shed. You know, if that's the positive encouragement that you need, well, then just do that. And once it's proven that you actually have the ability, then you can enroll in the actual ERS 10 or ERS 30. But just don't be afraid to ask for assistance. This isn't just all on you. You want to be able to partner with someone that can help you identify these areas to take advantage of. So in summary, there's 8 time periods, 3 seasons, 1 test, which is about a $48,000 opportunity. Now that is pre-split. When you do partner with someone, typically they are going to take a percentage of the savings, and those vary. That could be a 90-10 split, 85-15, 80-20. I've seen all different options. So that would be something to consider as you're partnering with someone. And then here are the different time periods. Again, you have to opt in to the specific time period that you want, or you could say, I want to do all of them. So you've got to decide which months, which are those 3 options, and then which times. So if I'm a school, for instance, I'm probably not going to opt in to the 7 to 10 p.m. because you're not really operating anyways. So there shouldn't be a lot to shed there. And then here's just the event history. And I find this so interesting because there really haven't been that many events called. So 5 events total. 2011 had 2, 1 in 2014, and then 2 last year. So last August was brutal. But you can see, even last August, the event was for 45 minutes, and the time prior to that was under 2 hours. So you're not talking about a huge chunk of time that you're having to curtail. Alex, do you want to do the fun trivia?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back to fun trivia time. Since it's almost the fall, or I guess the fall, what is the first day of fall 2020? Give you guys a few moments to respond on the right, or the left, or the bottom. We don't know where it is yet. You'll be responding.
This could be in all of the above, too.
It could be. All right, and Paige, what is it?
B, September 22nd, which will be here before we know it. Woohoo!
All right. Don't know why that is true, but that's the first day of fall 2020.
All right. You've seen this slide before. We've discussed the energy price. We've discussed the usage on the DR side, but you can see there's one more way, and it's called 4 coincidental peaks. So I'd like to touch on that briefly. Okay, so what is 4CP? It's 4 coincidental peaks, and this is an electricity charge that's on the regulated portion of your bill. It's just 1 over 10. There's many charges, many different line items on that portion of the bill, and this is just one of them. It is displayed as the transmission cost recovery factor, which is one of the largest charges. So I'm sure you've seen it before and wondered, gosh, what does that mean? So the peak demand has typically been measured in ERCOT between 345 and 6. So the 4CP is measured in June, July, August, and September. And ERCOT will take the highest 15-minute interval, and that is the peak set for that month. Now, the interesting thing is 4CP only applies to IDR metered customers. So if you do not have that interval data recorder, you will not have that transmission cost recovery factor that's associated with 4CP. Okay, so like I just said, it's calculated upon the system demands that are on the peak in June, July, August, and September. So I should say there is nothing that excludes a weekend or holiday from being a peak day. It just hasn't happened before. So I think in the previous slide it said non-holiday weekends. That's not necessarily the case. ERCOT doesn't specifically exclude that. Basically, the peak is the peak, and that's all they care about. But those 4 peak intervals for each month are averaged together, and then that value is used to determine your 4CP KW for that billing line item for the next year. So it's what your demand was at that specific time. So what's the impact? So with 100 kW of average curtailment, you could see approximately $4,000 to $5,000 of savings in that transmission cost recovery factor for the following year. So the things that you're doing in 2020, you're not going to see the savings until 2021. Just like if you worked to reduce your 4CP demand in 2019, you're just now getting the benefit of that this year. Now, I'm actually really excited about this. Here's a positive about a global pandemic and COVID-19. You know, with schools and a lot of buildings shutting down, you've experienced a lot of savings in usage because often students, teachers, and administrators haven't been in the buildings, especially, you know, in March when it first hit. I mean, these buildings were completely shut down. So you already experienced a huge reduction in your usage. And then with summer school not resuming, it would be very, very interesting. I would encourage every single person on this call to next year, please look at your 4CP. Please have your retail electric provider pull your 2020 numbers compared to 2019. Because if you don't believe me that you can save on 4CP, you've already saved this year without having to put in any effort because your facilities were closed. And I guarantee you that your 4CP number that's going to be billed in 2021 is going to be significantly lower than what you were billed this year. So I challenge you, come back to me in a year and say, oh my gosh, you were right, because I do love to hear that. It's just going to be interesting. And I think it's a positive story to tell. You know, so much of this pandemic has been negative, obviously, but this is a positive that we've experienced savings by not having these schools occupied with the reduction in consumption and the reduction in your peak demand as well. So here's the history, which I think is interesting too. I broke it down 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. You can see that it's often, we say between 3:45 and 6, but you can see, I mean, it's 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 4:45. I mean, so it's almost even smaller than that, the window. Now, what happens is if you decide to participate and say, okay, I'm on board with this 4CP, I'd like to test it out, you can ask your retail electric provider if they offer complimentary notifications. There are a ton of companies, you don't necessarily have to, you know, be with them necessarily, that will send out complimentary notifications. So, for example, you'll receive an email in the morning that says, you know what, this is the forecast for the day. We feel like there's a potential for a 4CP day. So we would encourage you to reduce your demand between the hours of 3 and 6. There is literally no harm in receiving that email. You can delete it and say, meh, not interested in dealing with that today. Or you could say, okay, let me tell people and let's try to cut back a little. You're not going to get a daily email. It's not like we've sent it every single day in August. But we do want to make sure that we're sending it on days where it's forecasted to be above 100 degrees. So you will get multiple notifications. No one can say with certainty, oh, this is the peak day, you're only going to receive one notice, and that's that. So just be prepared that whoever you partner with is probably going to send you multiple notifications, and that's a positive thing. But you don't necessarily have to do anything, but I would encourage you to try. But like you can see, it's in June and July, the peaks have already been set. August, we don't have the official time for 2020, and the max temps, that's crazy. We've had a fairly mild summer, at least towards the beginning. So yeah, this is an easy way to reduce. Okay, back to the basics one more time in case you don't remember this slide. Your energy price, just pick the right strategy. As I mentioned at the very beginning, there is no right or wrong answer, and that's the beauty about it. There are several different ways, and you just have to pick the way that works best for you. I will encourage you to maybe step outside your comfort zone. If your district or your city has been doing things the same way for 10 years, maybe it's time to try something new. And then your usage. There are simple ways to reduce your usage and take advantage of these programs. And again, just step outside of your comfort zone. A lot of these are not challenging. Just ask the right questions and partner with the right people so that you can take advantage of those. But if you focus on both of those, not just the energy price and not just reducing your usage, you're going to overall see those supply charges drop drastically, which at the end of the day, we're all just looking to lower the overall energy spend. So I think that's a win-win.
Awesome.
Here are pretty faces that you can't see with our contact information. If you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to chat on the side or down below. But if you think of something after the presentation or next week, you can contact either one of us directly to discuss.
Yes, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we hope you have a great virtual TEMA conference.
And we hope to see you soon. We want to actually see you. So fingers crossed.
So take care, and we'll be here to answer some questions.
Thank you.
So Alex had some great music, Star Wars music for you guys at the beginning of it to start the presentation, but somehow it didn't play. But thank you guys so much. Does anybody have any questions for Alex, our page? Continue to use the chat box. While people are writing in questions, do you guys have any final thoughts or additions that you'd like to add?
Oh, Glenn wants me to read his comment. Let me see, Glenn.
Oh, Glenn was going to say something.
Oh, that I'm the best electrical customer representative that he's ever had, with the possible exception of my boss, Tracy Ross. Thank you, Glenn. I feel the need to say I did not pay Glenn to say that, but I do appreciate it. But thank you for attending. We hope that y'all found it useful. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Alex or myself.
Thanks, guys.
So,
Marcia, thank you.
I'm gonna ask you guys to stay on for a second. We're about to go into the expo hall, and I want to play the expo hall preview. I'm going to do it differently, so I would like to hear from you guys to see if it works better than playing it through YouTube. So if you do have a question for Paige or Alex, you can still add it. It's perfectly fine. But let me see if you guys have issues this way. And I just need to know if you have issues. See, you probably can't hear it. That's the problem. Okay, so that works for you guys. Yay. I had to play that anyways because we're about to go into Expo Hall time. Steve does have a question for you though. Do you offer or recommend someone to help district with 4CP or load as a resource registration?
Okay. Yeah, so I would first recommend contacting your retail electricity supplier. They're going to, most, especially the large suppliers, offer complimentary 4CP notifications, and they can also help you with demand response participation as well, being a CSP. And if they don't, they should be able to point you in the right direction as far as some other companies that are separate and just specialize in that. And I hope you can hear me over my virtual Kinder.
Yes. It is always better than the noises from my house of chickens and roosters, so you're good. So as Steve is finishing up his typing, don't forget that in the virtual hall, go get a picture with some exhibitors and specifically sponsors for today's selfie competition, and then to hashtag Team of Virtual 2020. And then we also have the passcode game and the Find Terrence scavenger hunt, Terrence the Turtle. All of the information that you need to know about the games is on the TEMA's exhibit hall booth. So if you have any follow-up questions, go check it out there. If there are no more questions for Paige and Alex, thank you guys so much for this presentation. It was great. And all of this will be provided. Since we're having some YouTube issues and whatnot, I'm going to try my best to get things uploaded from today, upload it to the sessions tomorrow at the latest. So if you guys have any issues, I apologize, but we're trying to work that type of stuff out and provide you other, be agile and provide you other accessibility means. So thank you so much. Expo Hall is starting now. So, and then Women of TEMA will be at 11:50. So see you guys in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.